23 years. It's still quite hard to fully process the impact of September 11th, 2001.
It really is.
Beyond just the horror of the day itself, the scale of it all, it left such a deep scar. And, well, almost right away, alongside the official story, these questions and alternative theories started popping up.
That's right. And today, we're not really going back to the pain of that day, but we are taking a deep dive into the source material you shared, trying to understand those questions. We'll look at the established account, the main ideas behind the big conspiracy theories.
Yeah, and maybe why people believe them.
Exactly. Why they get traction, how the media portrayed them, what experts have said in response, and try to pull it all together.
Right. And our goal here isn't about taking sides, definitely not. It's more about digging in, trying to get a handle on it all.
Yeah.
We want to unpack what these 9/11 theories are actually claiming, put them next to the facts and evidence we have, and just explore why these ideas resonate. Okay, there's a lot here. Where do we even start with something this huge?
Well, I think the natural place to begin is the official narrative, sort of the baseline understanding of what happened, but mainly detailed in the 9/11 Commission report that came out in 2004, and then those really in-depth reports from NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Okay, NIST. Right. So what were the main findings? What did they actually determine happened that day?
The core finding, the big one, was that 19 hijackers linked to al-Qaeda carried out the attacks. They seized control of 4 commercial planes.
4, right.
2 hit the World Trade Center towers in New York. A third hit the Pentagon just outside D.C. and Virginia. And the 4th, Flight 93, crashed in Pennsylvania. Seems clear that was after the passengers and crew fought back.
That heroic struggle.
Yeah.
And the person responsible, the leader, that was identified pretty quickly.
Yes, Osama bin Laden, he was head of al-Qaeda, and he actually claimed responsibility in several video messages later on.
Okay. And NIST, you mentioned that they focused specifically on the World Trade Center collapses, right? What was their conclusion there?
Yeah, they zeroed in on why the towers fell. And their conclusion was pretty clear. It was the combination of the planes hitting the sheer force of the impact and then the fires that burned afterwards. Intense, long-lasting fires.
So the fire was key.
Absolutely. It weakened the steel structures, the support columns, basically to the point where they couldn't hold the weight anymore. Total structural failure. Think of it like heating metal until it loses its strength, becomes pliable, and then it just buckles under load.
Okay, that makes sense structurally. And thinking bigger picture, the official investigations, they also pointed fingers internally, didn't they, at intelligence failures?
Precisely. The 9/11 Commission highlighted some pretty significant failures in how intelligence was gathered, how agencies talked to each other or didn't talk to each other.
Communication breakdown.
Yeah, big time. And those failures hampered the government's ability to maybe piece things together beforehand to prevent it. But, and this is really crucial, they found zero evidence, nothing, to suggest it was intentional. No inside job, no deliberate orchestration by the U.S. government itself.
Right. But like you said at the start, that wasn't the end of the story for a lot of people. This is where the source material starts outlining these, well, prominent conspiracy theories that challenge that official version.
Exactly. Things start to diverge quite a bit here.
Okay, so let's get into some of these alternative ideas. The one you hear about probably the most is the controlled demolition theory for the World Trade Center. What's the main claim there?
The core idea is that the way the Twin Towers collapsed, and also Building 7 later that day, it wasn't just because of the planes of the fires.
Right.
The theory argues that explosives must have been planted beforehand and detonated, like a controlled demolition company would bring down an old building. People often point to how fast the towers fell, how sort of straight down they seem to come as evident.
Those images are incredibly powerful. You can see why people focus on them. But the actual investigations, what did they find about explosives? Did they look for that?
Oh, absolutely. The source material is very direct on this. NIST specifically investigated the possibility of explosives.
Yeah.
Extensively. And they found absolutely no physical evidence. None. No residue, no blast patterns consistent with explosives, nothing like that in any of the WTC buildings.
So their conclusions stayed the same?
Yes. For the Twin Towers, it remained. Structural failure caused by the heat weakening the steel, combined with the damage from the planes hitting them. And for WTC-7, the other building that fell, NIST, concluded that it started with a key internal column buckling. It was damaged by debris and weakened by fires, and once that went, it triggered a kind of chain reaction, a progressive collapse. like pulling out a critical Jenga block.
Right, the whole thing comes down. Okay, no explosives found. What about the Pentagon? There's that other persistent theory that it wasn't Flight 77 that hit it.
That's correct. The Pentagon missile theory. It suggests that instead of the Boeing 757, it was actually, well, a missile or maybe even a drone that struck the building.
And the reasoning behind that one.
Often, proponents point to the initial damage, the hole in the facade. They argue it looked too small for a huge plane like a 757.
Okay, and again, what does the source material say about the actual evidence on the ground?
Well, the facts presented are pretty compelling. You have numerous eyewitnesses, first responders right there, people nearby who reported seeing a large commercial airliner hit the Pentagon.
So, eyewitness accounts?
Yes, and also surveillance footage from nearby buildings that backs that up shows the impact of a large plane. Plus, investigators recovered a lot of aircraft debris at the Pentagon site.
Debris-like.
Identifiable parts of a Boeing 757, including the flight data recorder, the black box. And critically, DNA evidence that matched passengers confirmed to be on Flight 77.
Okay, that seems pretty definitive. Let's turn to Flight 93 then, the one that crashed in Pennsylvania. There's a specific theory about that one too, right?
Yes, the shoot-down theory. This one proposes that Flight 93 didn't crash because the passengers fought back, but because it was shot down by the U.S. military.
That's a very serious claim. What evidence does our source material offer on that?
The source material really emphasizes the data from the plane itself. The cockpit voice recorder, the flight data recorder, the black boxes, they strongly support the official account. You can actually hear the struggle, the passengers trying to regain control.
Wow.
And beyond that, the way the debris was scattered at the crash site, it was consistent with a high-speed impact into the ground, not an explosion in midair from a missile. And crucially, no missile fragments were ever found. You'd expect to find something if it had been shot down.
Okay, so the physical evidence doesn't line up with a shoot down. Then we get to the broader theories, the ones suggesting government involvement, LIHOP and MIHOP. Can you break those down?
Sure. LIHOP stands for Let It Happen on Purpose. MIHOP is Made It Happen on Purpose.
Right.
So LIHOP suggests that maybe U.S. intelligence knew the attacks were coming, but deliberately did nothing to stop them. MIHOP goes further, suggesting elements within the U.S. government actually planned and executed the attacks themselves.
And the motive often cited for MIHOP is?
Usually the idea is it was a pretext, a false flag, to justify going to war in the Middle East, particularly Iraq.
Okay, those are monumental accusations. What does the source material say about evidence for either LIHOP or MIHOP?
Well, the 9/11 Commission did directly address intelligence failures. They acknowledged serious problems with information sharing and analysis, like we mentioned earlier. But despite a really deep investigation, the Commission found absolutely no credible evidence to support the idea that authorities intentionally let it happen, and certainly no evidence they made it happen.
And the Iraq War connection.
It's true, allegorically, that the Bush administration used 9/11 as a major justification for the Iraq War later on. That's documented. But the source material is clear. There's no credible evidence suggesting 9/11 itself was staged in order to make that happen. The link is justification after the event, not orchestrating the event itself.
So we have these official findings based on investigations, evidence, and then these alternative theories that just won't go away. Which brings us to the question, why? Why do these conspiracy theories grab hold and keep circulating? The source material touches on this, right?
It does. It points to a few key factors, psychological and sort of socio-political ones. One big one is this idea called the need for cognitive closure.
Cognitive closure.
Yeah, basically, huge traumatic events like 9/11 are just deeply confusing and upsetting. They shake your sense of order. Conspiracy theories, even if they're pretty outlandish, can offer what feel like simple, straightforward explanations. They assign blame clearly, create a narrative. And for some people, that sense of certainty, even a dark certainty, can be psychologically preferable to just grappling with chaos and uncertainty.
That makes a certain kind of sense. Like our brains are trying to find a pattern, a clear story, even if reality is messy. What else plays a role?
Another really big one mentioned is distrust in government. The source points to things like, well, the lead up to the Iraq War itself, based on intelligence that turned out to be faulty, and later scandals about government surveillance, things like that have definitely eroded public trust for a lot of people.
So that erosion of trust makes people more receptive.
It can, yeah. If you already distrust institutions, you might be more willing to believe theories that paint them as villains, even without strong proof. It fits a pre-existing skepticism.
And we can't talk about information spreading today without talking about the internet.
Absolutely critical. The internet, social media, they've created these, information silos or echo chambers.
Right.
It's incredibly easy now to find online groups that share your exact beliefs, whatever they are, and just reinforce them constantly. You get exposed only to information that confirms what you already think and rarely see counterarguments or fact checks that can really cement belief in something, even if it's based on misinformation.
So how did these alternative ideas get out into the mainstream? I definitely remember some films and books that made a big splash.
Yeah, the source material mentions that polls, especially in the years right after 9/11, showed a surprising number of people, both here and internationally, who felt the government was involved somehow, or at least wasn't telling the whole truth.
Hmm.
And things like the documentary Loose Change or books like David Ray Griffin's The New Pearl Harbor, they were very popular and definitely brought these theories to a much wider audience.
But those works weren't without criticism, were they?
No, definitely not. It's important to note, as the source does, that experts and analysts heavily criticize them for, well, misrepresenting evidence, using logical fallacies, and kind of picking and choosing facts to fit the theory they wanted to push.
Okay. And on the flip side, there were efforts to actively debunk these theories using science and investigation.
Yes, a significant effort. Publications like Popular Mechanics did detailed breakdowns, point by point, debunking common conspiracy claims. Skeptic organizations weighed in. And really importantly, professional engineering groups, like the American Society of Civil Engineers, have consistently backed the official science-based explanations for the tower collapses.
So the engineering community largely supports the NIST findings.
Overwhelmingly, yes. The source even notes that groups promoting the demolition theory, like Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, have been criticized by other engineers for basically cherry-picking data and not applying standard engineering principles correctly.
Okay, so pulling this all together, what's the main takeaway from the source material about this clash between the official story and the conspiracy theories?
The source really highlights a stark contrast. You've got the claims from the conspiracy theories on one hand, and on the other, you have the findings from the official investigations, which are backed up by, detailed scientific work from NIST, lots of eyewitness accounts, and a broad agreement among experts in relevant fields like engineering, aviation, etc.
And the source's conclusion on the theories themselves.
Ultimately, the source concludes that while skepticism is healthy, even necessary in a democracy, the 9/11 conspiracy theories just don't have credible, verifiable evidence behind them. And maybe just as importantly, pushing them can be incredibly hurtful and disrespectful to the victims and their families.
Right. And the source also stresses that understanding why people believe these things is important in itself.
Absolutely. Getting a handle on those psychological drivers, the role of trust, the way information spreads online, that's key if we want to effectively counter misinformation and help people understand complex, major events like 9/11 based on facts.
So after this deep dive into the source material, what seems to emerge pretty clearly is this significant gap, a real divergence between what the 9/11 conspiracy theories claim and the mountain of evidence supporting the official investigations and expert analysis.
That sums it up well. The source material lays out a strong case for the established account while showing the lack of credible support for those alternative narratives that are still out there.
Which kind of leads us to a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. In this age we live in, where information is everywhere, but figuring out what's true is often so hard, what do you think are the best ways for us to evaluate really complex events? How do we sort credible explanations from these alternative narratives, especially when things get so tangled up with strong emotions and our trust or lack of trust in institutions? Definitely something worth thinking about.